Hello.
Hello, hello. Hopefully, I'm coming through. I think somebody's popped in here. Maybe it's Mr. Slovak. Hopefully, I can be heard. Hey, Arnold. Hey, hello, hello. Yeah, my weekend was short. I actually am off today. Took a day off from work, and guess what I'm doing? Doing the hobby I enjoy. Hey, what's up, Dwayne? Just checking if my mic wasn't picking stuff up, so I had to reset my headset here, and it looks like it's picking up. But I thought I'd come on and talk a little football today because I just listened to the World Cup format that Chris Slovik is doing with his 2007 college football. And it got me, and then he shared some information because he and I are collaborating on an idea he had, and I'm creating the teams based off the state of origin. So I was going to highlight some of the teams and then also cover photographs because I've had people reach out quite a bit talking about, photos and can I get this and how do they show up in the game, subfolders. I've probably gone over it on, I'm going to say baseball. I don't know if I've gone over it on football. It's very similar um, process to make sure that you've got it in the right folder and whether you're using subfolders or just your basic one. So I'm going to do that. The nice thing with Chris and our project is it's based on a player's birth, what state they were born in. I've got it identified down to 30. We're going to have 32 teams in here because some states will be combined because of their size, based on geography. He's coming up and tweaking the format he's going to use, which I think is just going to be incredible. Um, and because he's going to wrap up his other projects, then walk into that. I think after the new year in January sometime, it gives me time to get the teams done, do a lot of play testing and everything. And actually, I'm pretty far ahead on the creation. I think I'm 8 or 9 teams in. I'm just wrapping up. I think I have the defensive backs for Minnesota, but I can let you. You can see here. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so I'm almost done with my ninth team, meaning I've done all the research. Hey, Nathaniel, how are you? I've done all the research for the most part and got the ratings done on my sheet. So now I'm able to build them into the game. Some, hey, it's just like real football, right? If you look at across the league, some teams are going to have great players at every position because of the size of the state, in this case, because of the player pool. Others are going to be tough, right? And you may have a hidden jewel like Minnesota. I was just creating them. And let me bring my pop up screens over here. So we take a look at Minnesota right here. There's Minnesota's quarterback. You got Winky, Trudeau, and Steve Walsh. So it's not great, right? Highest rating, what, 74.6 for a quarterback? And we can compare that to some of the other teams I've done. So this is a pretty weak stable of quarterbacks. But hey, if you're a football team, you may have weak quarterbacks. And it means, hey, what else have you got on your staff to make up for it? Running backs, not, they don't even have an 1,000-yard rusher. And again, I'm taking peak seasons here, not consecutive ones, but 3 seasons or so to come up with the stats and to rate the players. So you can see Marion Barber is on here, Les Josephson, Bertelson, Ted McKnight, who played with the Kansas City in the late 70s, Zach Zenner, who played for the Lions, actually made it. So this is not great, right? But hey, you've got running backs. Now, wide receivers, they've got some decent ones. You've got Adam Thielen and Larry Fitzgerald, who were born in Minnesota. And then you've got Eric Decker, Dave Casper at tight end. So, I mean, they've got some quality when it comes to receiving. So each one of these teams, it's just interesting to see how that's played out. It just really is. It's just fun for me as I do the ratings. Offensive linemen, they got Jim Langer at center, Matt Burke. decent, right? Defensive line, this is where they may be a little rough. Like Terrell Suggs that can play DE or linebacker is the best rated player they've got. So this is probably one of the weakest D lines I've seen. Linebackers I just got done with, not great. Um, DBs I haven't put in there yet. So I'll get those in here. Take me about 10 minutes to get them built in, create them, and drop my ratings in there. Then the Minnesota team will be done. Now let's compare that to Pennsylvania. Take a look at their quarterbacks. Now, for the project, I've got to say that it's you can only play one quarterback, right? And then I think Chris, when he does his tournament, is going to narrow the rosters down. But there's so many prominent ones here. I definitely wanted to make them available because when I make this available to the community, there's no doubt people will be like, "Hey, where's so and so I want to play with from my home state?" Right? Well, as you can see here, there's 7 quarterbacks that are very prominent throughout their history in the NFL. So you know, this 71 players on this roster, it's really hard because of the quality to figure out who makes the cut. Running backs, that's Jim Brown. Or no, I'm sorry, it's Larry. Right, yeah, Larry Brown from Washington. And you can see that some of these early teams, I've got the template I'm going to use for the player photos because I'm going to make those available to the community so it matches. It's a great companion to this file. And I mentioned to Chris earlier if he was going to turn on the photos, and he said in his broadcast a little earlier, hey, yeah, you might want to go on there and do something about walking people through. So I'm going to do a little bit of highlighting some of these rosters, talk a little bit about the project, and then also go over the photo assignment. So yeah, deep here, right? I mean, look how deep this running back core is. Wide receivers, same thing. You've got some tight ends, Ditka and Todd Christensen, Bob Tucker, Brandon Marshall's in there. So, this is a deep team, Pennsylvania. So it's going to be fun. There's going to be states, of course, with the bigger populations, and some of them will be a little bit smaller, but they've just got some great players that will help make them compete against some of the bigger states like California and Texas by far with over 2,600 players. So how do I get photos to show up in my game? And here's what you can do. The big thing to look at is when you go to your DK Sports folder, and see, I've got all the games and a bunch of other stuff that shouldn't be in this folder that has mistakenly been dropped here, and I've just never cleaned it up. But you'll see DK Sports, there'll be a folder for all of the, we'll call it seasons, player photos, all the particulars for each game. So I own, golf, hockey, football, I own them all. So I've got a right here, and then I've created some other folders in here myself just to store things when I work on projects. So if it's football game, I'm going to go to football, and you're going to see player photos. When I click on that, this is where you could drop, and you'll see I've got some that are just visible here. If you download a photo pack from one of the community sites, you can go and just drop it in player photos. And then it will look at whatever the naming convention is. I think typically I use first name underscore last name. Okay. Hey, Chris, good to see you. So when you download the packs, I think that's pretty much the standard format, first name underscore last name. So you'll see here that I've got a lot from my past projects where I just dumped all of my photos into the right here, just the raw player photos. Then you'll notice, some of you may, how did I get these subfolders up here? And that's easy. Here's how you get the subfolders. You have the choice. Let me go. Is it rules? It's a little different with each game how I find this. Somebody's going to have to tell me. I'm going to display, structure. Oh boy. Somebody could save me time and just put it in there. I always forget where it's at in this game. Baseball, I know easily. Is it quick play? Oh, Steve, where is it? I'd have done my homework before I got here. Oh, right here. So if you go under your rules setup, go to the last tab, display, and you'll see player photos. when you have this box unchecked, watch this. I'll hit save changes. Now, when you go to those teams I was looking at, there's no player photos there because, well, it found a Rich Saul photo because now it's looking at your general player photos. So if you've never put any photos in there and you don't care, having specific photo sets for different years or projects, you can just dump them all in the middle. But since I want special photos just for this project, if you go look here, anytime that you go to rules and hit subfolder, okay, it's going to look, it's going to create a folder, the exact name of your league. So if you look over here down in the bottom right, the name for this is state teams, okay? So now when I go to drop player photos and I want to see them, I need to make sure when I go to DK Sports data folder, football, I go into the player photos and I look at the league specific name. And you'll see right here, state teams. So when you click on that, this allows me to drop in photos just for that league. Hey, JT Dutch, good to see you. And that's the difference, right? So when you unzip download photos, wherever that's at, right? You can go into downloads here. I don't think I've got any. I don't have anything to really show off, but let's say you grab a zip file from the community and you download it, right? Open it up. It's where do you extract it to? Are you going to extract it to DK Sports football or what? Pick your season. This works for all the games. Player photos and just drop them here. Or are you going to click one down and drop them into your specific league folder? And it all depends. And one of the reasons this is great is instead of having just one player photo folder, you can have one for every replay you do. So if you wanted to go and start off in 1970, you start with this 1970 league and set it to subfolder. It'll create a subfolder, and that way you can have players from 70 there. Then when you go and you want to do 71, you can download a photo, and there's many photo sets out there that go year by year. That's the cool thing about the subfolders, because then if you're using a football card style or whatever, they'll move along. That's the best thing. So for this state teams, I've already created, and this is where I'm dumping in because I'm using a different format with the logo right here. And whereas before, kind of the ones that I just threw in my main folder, it was a different format. And then I said, yeah, I might as well start using subfolders. So as I get a few teams done, I'm stopping and trying to get the photos. And usually I'll get 2, 3, 4, or 5. I'll get carried away. It's like being a kid making football cards. And I'll do many photos. But for this project, since I want to have it all nice and pretty and done for Chris when he gets ready to roll in January, I'm just going to limit it to 1, maybe 2 photos for some really prominent players. So you can see here, it's making me just really figure out which photo I want to use. But here's Joe Schmidt. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking the logo from the year I'm using. So let's say for Schmidt, I'm using 61, 63, and 64. I'm going to assign him, let's say, to a middle year there, 63, and then I'll find like what was the logo during that time, drop it into my card template. So if you look at some of my other Lions players I've done that a little bit, we get up into, where's Mike Lucci? He's early 1970, I think Lucci is. Here he is. So now he'll have that, he's coming from, and he'll have the specific logo for that era there to match. As some teams, have changed logos throughout the year. So Len Dawson, here's another example. Len Dawson's got this logo on his card, but another Chief, Larry Johnson, is going to have this one. So it takes a little bit of time, but I enjoy doing it because it adds a lot to the game for me. And I think it'd be really cool when we're done with this state project. I'm assuming that there could be a really good desire for this. Chris keeps telling me that he thinks this is going to be a great project in that it'll cause some great arguments, right? Good conversation in the community about, hey, I want, which state has the best team. So his I guess soccer style approach is going to be a blast to this. Some people have asked, how did you get the teams? I said, well, I've had to come up with it was interesting. We ended up with 32, and for some teams, when I went and downloaded their data from Sports Reference, from Football Reference, they just didn't have enough to field, so they got combined where it made sense. So, for example, we're going to have an Appalachian team, which is basically Kentucky and West Virginia. Maryland, along with DC and Delaware, are combined. The New England states, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, those are combined. New York has its own team. Jersey has its own team. A lot of the southern states have their own team. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. I combined the Carolinas, Florida, Texas. Now, out west, I had to figure out how to carve these teams up to get enough in their player pool. So I did a Southwest team that's New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada. I did a mountain team that is Utah and Colorado together. And then there's a big sky team that combines Idaho, North, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana. Um, Washington and Oregon were combined for like a Pacific Northwest team. California is huge, it's on its own. I have a team for the islands, I call it, which combines Hawaii, Alaska, Samoa, and some of the other islands. Then the 32nd team's really cool. All players that were born internationally, outside the US or a US territory. And there's enough to field a team there. So it all works out to 32 teams. Now in the Midwest, in the prairie country, I did have to combine. Oh gosh, is it Kansas? I always forget which two they are. Is it Kansas, Missouri, and then Iowa? I'll have to look. I have like a corn and a prairie team that where two of those teams are grouped together. But anyway, more to come on that because I think as we finish out the fall here and get closer to the project, I'm going to come on as I get every couple of weeks when I get a batch of teams done and maybe try to kind of hype up this league for Chris when it gets to be the new year and do some team reveals, go through the rosters, and highlight that. So try to get some information. So Chris is putting in some interesting stuff in here about this because he's taken a really neat approach. So he's going to put on high school rules, which will be great. He'll be able to do a bunch of games, and we're going to use alternate reality. So it will be based off the player's stats and attributes, but in action, when you use alternate reality, which Chris has done before, it throws a little bit of, I guess, realism into it, meaning they might be a little better than they normally would, a little worse, or right about the same. So it adds a little bit of unknown flavor. So it's not just looking at raw data to be able to make the determination. Little element of realism as it's future focused and not backwards focused, like a replay would be. So interesting. High school rules and putting field goal posts on the lines. This is going to be a blast. One of the hardest things is going to be figure out, hey, who starts on some of these deep teams, right? So when I get done with the teams, it's going to give me a chance to really play around with some of the manager settings in football, which I have not done a ton of. And we can take a look at those. Let's see here. We look at one of these rosters here. Let's pull up Illinois right here. Illinois' quarterbacks, Jim Hart, great St. Louis Cardinal. Kenny Anderson, who would probably be who I start here. I think he's really underrated for, he's really ahead of his time, more of a modern style quarterback, but even earlier. Donovan McNabb, you've got. Now, there's another intriguing thing here. And you'll look at the ratings. Kirk Cousins has a 99.1 rating. However, this is one of the things I love when we've got players from different eras, because if you look at Cousins, Cousins is going to be based, he's 2017, okay? Ken Anderson is based in 1979. So let's take a look at Cousins, and we'll go to ratings. Look at the ERA plus, because that's gonna take into account the cross era information. So I like looking at, you can see like how well they rush. 100 would be dead average. We're looking at how well they are at avoiding, pass interception percentage or completion percentage. Being over 100 is what you want. So Cousins is 7% better than average. Remember, he's got a higher rating. Ken Anderson, 19% better, which means This guy, for his era, the numbers he put up with, this is probably the one that I'd want to start just looking at those numbers, right? McNabb, he's pretty dead average. Now, if you want a quarterback that can be a dual threat and run, take a look at this. He's 45% over the rushing average for a regular quarterback. So it's style, right? So this is intriguing to dig into this and talk about, what could I do here, right? I mean, what kind of offense do I want to run? Because to me, you've got Anderson there one way or McNabb as a dual threat. Jim Hart, pretty average. 102, right? Not great. Cousins 107. So this is a really good, I guess, barometer just to kind of check in when you're bringing all-time greats or players in from all different places, man. All different places. MV. Oh, MV's here. We had the craziest night the other night, but it was blast. It was just like an organic one mess, hot mess to the next, and we just had a lot of fun doing head to head. Which I would say for anybody that has not done head to head, football. We did basketball, which can be a little because of all it's a moving game that's having to be slowed down to be simulated. I'll tell you one thing, it was fun. But the other games, I think, even lend themselves for head to head better than anything. Football for sure and baseball really lend themselves to head to head. But we showed that you can play a great head to head matchup. And we got MV to learn how to use the Hamachi and the direct tunnel and all that. So he's set up. Hey, Legends. This is right up Legends Alley. Just popped on after Chris did his stuff, trying to highlight this project and talk a little bit about the file and how I'm loving building the players. And then once I get it done, I'm going to start figuring out, okay, now how do I get into this code? So let's say you got an all-star team. Replay, it's pretty easy because you can look at carries and passing, right? But if I want to take Illinois and say, okay, I've got 4 good quarterbacks here. Look at all these carries, right? Who am I going to go with? Because these teams are so stacked. They don't replicate a replay season where you have all the exact numbers. You've got somebody who was the main back and the backup one. So if I go into the coach tool, let's look at game plan. And this is going to get me deep into the game. So we could say default offense. Boom, it just did it. So now it wants to run 52%. Now I think what it's looking at is your overall carries versus passes per player. And it's giving me an example here of, what I want to do. And I think this is where you can really drill down and say, okay, how do I want to manage this team overall, right? Do I want, when I'm on first down, second down, I mean, how much do I want to go to be a run related team? Same thing on defense in these situations. Let's say default defense. Has anything changed? Not sure here. You can really tweak how you want the coverage to be all the way down. We talk about the player level and all this good stuff. In baseball, just look at this. I have never gone in to this level. Now, if I was in a league and I'm trying to set up a computer manager and have it act the way I would like it to, this is where you'd want to go, right? One thing I'll look at, let's go to the player. Let's pull up Armstrong here. So each player has a coach. Take a look at the code. Let's pull it up. Now I can determine how I want to play Armstrong, right? I can sit here and tell you where I want him, if I want him to, split out, stay in to block, all this stuff. They have the same chart. Of course, he's not on defense, right? Now here's target usage. When you got an all-star team like this, everybody's going to have these targets that are just crazy, right? So let's say I'm looking at this, I'm like, I'm going to try to get him 18 per game to hit his target. That makes sense when you're using a stock team for a replay, right? I mean, this is what you'd exactly want the game to do. Target real life usage so it comes out realistic. But what do you do in an all-star? Right? Because now let's look at Greg Pruitt. He's going to get 15 a game. Turner, 21. Brown. So it defaults to what it would need per game to get them to be realistic. But hey, we're not going to get 120 carries in the game so that all these people, get their stuff. But here's where you can go into your all-star team and start saying, hey, you know what? Who are my main backs? I think I'm going to go. I want Armstrong to try to get, 12 a game. I want Pruitt to get, um, or you could change it by the season, whatever, you know, 10 a game, only 2 passes a game, all this good stuff. So this is stuff I've never been into, but it would be incumbent in a league like this to have a more targeted approach that resembles how you'd manage the team itself. Or you could just let the computer manager figure it out. But this could really let you, and that's good to know, legends, because I'll keep us entertained for another 15 20 minutes, and then we can roll right into your baseball broadcast, which is great. I'm sitting here enjoying the community and got some chores to do today, but I took a day off from work, so thought we'd talk a little bit of football and answer any questions. Showed a little bit about the photo pack because I think this project, which I have to say I never wanted to do, never intrigued me at all to have a state approach. The baseball state this has never appealed to me. And then Chris kept mentioning it. And then all of a sudden I started digging into it and now I'm obsessed. It's like, this is pretty cool, man. I like it. Um, but it's give me a chance when I'm done with the teams to come in here and set that up. And I know Chris um, is going to try to. He even said 43 active on the roster. Whew, I don't know. I think trying to get down to 53 and figure out like when I send him the disc what 53 are active because you can see we've got starters called out here. I've run some depth charts on some of the teams, but Pennsylvania, look, there's 71 players because when you look at quarterback, I mean, it's loaded. So to get it down to a whatever is an official roster, whether that's whatever Chris decides. Um, you're going to have some people that are on the inactive, right? But I just I'm balancing not creating too many players and having 70 on everything, and I'm also balancing that with well, if they're really prominent and you're from that state, why am I cutting it off at 3 or 4 quarterbacks if the fifth's really good, right? Some states it's hard. Here's Georgia. Deshaun Watson's on a team. Brad Johnson, Cam Newton. That'll be fun. Herschel Walker right here. Jamal Lewis. And Jim Brown was born in Georgia. I had never paid attention to that or knew it. So this will be a good team. I could imagine a backfield if it was me coaching this team with Jim Brown and Herschel Walker and how you could use the benefits of both. So from a league perspective, it's just really intriguing. And I think what's cool about this is we're not trying to get everybody balanced. I had some people originally that had me thinking, well, Steve, Texas is a big state. Why don't you do an East West? California's big. Why don't you do a Northern California, Southern California? And at first I thought, yeah. And then I realized that's not my goal, nor is it, I think, Chris's goal. So when he and I talked, you know, some of these states are just going to be blessed. It's just the way it is. It didn't make sense to carve states up into territory. And it's just like in the real league, right? You're going to have, if you look at a season, we go back and look at baseball, the Yankees are the Yankees, right? And, the A's through the 40s and 50s were horrible. Um, but that's just what they were. And in this, look at college game or high school game. There's some teams that are just going to be stacked. There's some states that I think will outperform their population or their pool, which is going to make that so much fun, right? I mean, is it a state like California and Texas that by far have over 2,600 pros to choose from, both of them? But you take some of those southern states that have 600, 700 players can be really good. I don't have any of them built yet, other than Georgia. But like I tell you what, don't sleep on the Louisiana team or Mississippi. Yeah. And I think, as Chris said, it's sure to be an argument starter. And I think he's claiming, Chris is, that this is should have a lot of popularity in the community as, my plan is to make this available so everybody can play it, enjoy it. And I want to have the photo packs there for everybody as well. So first team I created, being from Michigan, is I created the Michigan team. I think what I'm going to do is when I have a state, I'm going to try to follow the colors, probably of college, and maybe the same mascot to figure out. I was going to go with state flag, and then I'm like, I didn't like how that looks, so I'm just going to maybe, Illinois. We'll stick with those colors. Ohio. Chris is going to put. I'm going to build the file. Hopefully, he won't have to do a lot of tweaking where I put them in the most prominent stadium in that state, right? But I'm going to try to give them a mascot and a team name that makes sense. Where I'm combining other ones, there'll be a Pacific Northwest team that has Washington and Oregon. We're going to have a New England team. We're going to have a joint Carolina team. Trying to think, Big Sky is what comes to mind for the Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, North and South Dakota. Yeah, underdog states will be fun for sure in this. Pull up my Excel sheet. Anybody cares to look at that, but we can see, blow it up a little bit so everybody can see what I got going on here. How much can I blow this up? Oh, I'm hitting the wrong button. So let's take a look at it. Take a look at, oh gosh. Let's just fire this up while I crash my Excel sheet because I'm trying to make it a lot smaller than I need to here. And if it's doing that, because I've got a huge sheet right here. Oh well, getting excited, hitting buttons. I was going to show off some of the rosters for these other teams. Minnesota, the team I'm working on now, I think I just got done with Wisconsin. Interesting team. Interesting team, Wisconsin. Kaepernick's there, Jay Schrader, Dave Craig. Again, if we look at this, the rating, Kaepernick's got the highest rating, right? Just based on raw, the style of football. But if we look at this team, let's take a look at the ratings in the ERA plus. So when I like to look at completion percentage, Dave Craig is a 103. Schrader is below average, 94. I watched him play, doesn't shock me. Kaepernick is dead average. So if we're looking at now, he's got a run threat to him, right? Dave Craig, not so much a run. But if I'm going to go with a passing game, I'm going to probably start Craig. If I want to bring Kaepernick in as a kind of a dual threat, he's there. Schrader, probably going to be a backup. He's not a runner, and he's below average when you start looking at the ERA plus um, where he came from. Oklahoma, here's another one. Oklahoma and Minnesota may have, well, Bradford's better. They're better than Minnesota's quarterback group. This is the quarterbacks. You got Sam Bradford by far, right? Yeah, a little above average. Pretty good. You got Brandon Whedon below. Steve Fuller, not as bad for his era, right? But Fuller, um, not great when it comes to just not as good as Bradford. But that'll be the Oklahoma quarterbacks. So Oklahoma probably won't be airing it out as much, but let's take a look at their receiver. They got some possession receivers here. You got Wes Welker, Steve Largent, Roger Carr, Mark Clayton, Buddy Dial. I'm also making sure there's 3 tight ends on the team for depth on each team. But you can see here, Oklahoma, 61 players, right? I'm also looking at offensive linemen and trying to have at least 9, if not 10. And I'm trying to make sure you've got a couple centers, you got 3 to 4 guards and 3 to 4 tackles there so that there's plenty of depth. Here's Oklahoma, right? John Kolb from the Steelers. But, not a lot of stellars with some of these teams, not a lot of 10s or 10 pluses. Defensive lineman, Mark Gastineau, who I did not know was born in Oklahoma. Leroy Selman up there. And again, what's nice with Pro Football Reference is you can get all that accurate stat data right back to 1960. So I'm loving that. If anybody's ever rated for action, it's typically you get a point for every 2 sacks. So on the rush. So you can see right here, 18 sacks. So Gastineau's a rush. I pretty much saved the 10 rating for anybody that's over 20 sacks average, which isn't too many people. Linebacking core. Here's brother of Leroy, Dewey Selman. Carl Banks, you know, decent ones. DBs, Darrell Green used to be the fastest man in the NFL, is there. So having a um, ton. Yeah, and here's what Slovic's saying. This is the cool thing. He's going to turn on alternate reality, so there's, it's got a little bit of that kind of future realistic element. High school rules, um, and yeah, you can only play 11 at a time, right? Meaning, I mean, you've got all these teams, but which 11 are you going to put on the field? So special teams, I'm also making sure that if I've got to go back and add that there's a decent amount of options for kick returns and punt returns and stuff like that. Kickers, sometimes I'm putting in a couple options for the states that had really, like Dan Bailey made it, and then I think this Josh Brown who can also kick, and he's like a backup punter there, and Tressway is the punter here. So yeah, just it would be easy. I own the football history collection. It would be easy just to grab them and bring them in because that's based on their peak, but I'm doing my own. So it is taking me some while. These are all by scratch created. Um, and a lot of times people say, Steve, how do you get the ratings? Here's what you do. So I'll show you right here. I've got Minnesota I'm working on. Let's say I want to go to my edit roster, generate default ratings, right? So the ones I will use are this. I'm doing my own lineman blocking and defense ratings, right? Because you could put in a bunch of your team data and opponent data and let it really come up with what it wanted to rate them. But I'll do durability, which is based on games and games started like that. I'll do the rushing style, breakaway, audible and pressure. I do myself. Skill blocking and I do myself. The receiver rating is just basically based on their era. It's based on their receptions. So and it'll tell you right here the league data. So I'm using 1980. Yeah, I'm assigning all the teams to 1980 as a default. So it'll sit here and calculate the ratings. Boom. So now I can go over and look at my skill ratings. I'm going to do the skill blocks myself, the block ratings, but it's given them like um, take a look at so it's given the average breakaway. Where's my goodies here? You can also edit ratings right here. So this will go up here and show run style, which is both versus inside or out, right? This is balanced both, but it's given them a rating on short yards and then their ability to break away, right? And then receivings based on the reception. So that's my starting point before I go in and tweak everything. A lot of times people say, "How do you get your ratings?" Well, they'll create these based off the raw numbers you're putting in, right? And then I have some other sources I look at to go in and tweak the offensive, all of my ratings like defense against the run and pass and sacks and all that good stuff. So Darrell Green went to Texas A&I. So yeah, having fun with that. Ohio, got the Ohio team here. They've got some good quarterbacks as well. There's the four prominent ones. I could go a little deeper with some mediocre quarterbacks, but they're pretty prominent. I'll build them out to a certain point because that way it's going to give options to those that download this disc. And of course, somebody can always go when they get this disc and add a player if they would like to see a certain player. I use their AV, a value that's assigned in Pro Football Reference, their peak AV and all that to kind of determine who's going to make the rosters. But here's four fine quarterbacks. Let's look at Roethlisberger as ERA plus 109, but he's not a runner. Wilson a 106, but he is. So right, Roethlisberger is a hair better. You're going to have him in the pocket, but then you throw Russell Wilson in here with the dual threat. That might be the starter. Here's your best quarterback right here, Staubach, a 110 pass completion. He was really an efficient passer when he was ending his career, era specific. Len Dawson, right there with him, 110. So that 110 means they were, 10% better than the league average. So they stood out. So this is just a great way when you're trying to figure out which quarterback am I going to play and how am I going to get there. The other cool thing about all these ratings here, boom, you click on this button and let me move it over. Action brings all this up and talks about the rating and how it's used in the game. So if you haven't hit this ratings question mark and you're new to the game, this is awesome right here. The other fun thing is let's go look at an offensive lineman. Let's take a look at Dan Deerdorf. So Deerdorf is a tackle and he's rated a 9 and a 10, right? But if you moved him as a tackle and played him in a position he's not rated for, this shows you what the game would do. Since he's a 9 to 10 tackle, him going to guard, he's going to get a slight knockdown, a little bit more to play center because it's a little more difficult switch. If you tried to bring that tackle and throw him out at tight end, this shows you what his run and pass block would be. So this is a great way. Here's Travis Kelce. Yeah, he's a 10 plus. He's an 11 run and a 9 on the pass. But if you moved him to guard or tackle, he's going to get a little bump down. Now, if you want to see what it looks like if you want to play if he's playing tired, this is awesome. Click on the play tired. So if you're leaving him in the game and not bringing him out and it says, "Hey, he's tired," this is you're getting to see what the game would do right here, how it's going to adjust for that. So really awesome roster tools in here. Yeah, exactly. Legends. AV is great. The other thing is I use a lot is I have action seasons I can look at and see, hey, what did they rate? But then I'm looking at AV, and then I'm looking at other resources I've had. And I've got so many spreadsheets where I've used created players and have different things. Even Second and 10, which I think is a great game. My only knock on Second and 10 is it, I mean, coaching like head to head and coaching the game, there's nowhere near the amount of options, right? I mean, in some ways it's fun because it's rather easy to click on those more simple plays and play, and you get all the seasons. But I use them a lot for their ratings, which is very similar to AV, but it differs in some instances. So I use it as one of my resources when I'm looking at a player's certain seasons and how I'm going to rate them and trying to differentiate their abilities between run blocking and pass blocking, for example. So a lot of cool tools here in the game. Let's look at running backs. Larry Zonka. This is not going to show me a playing tired because he doesn't have any of his defensive ratings there. Rushing average, he's 23% over what his era was, which means he can crank out some good yards. Not a back to have there as he's coming out. Dead even would be there's another great fullback, Jim Otis for the Cardinals. Dead on 100 rushing average right there. So if we look to say how is he 100 rushing average? He's built in 75. So here's his if you ever want to, this is how I go about doing it. I create them right here. You go in here and just hit a create player and then you right click and you can, this is how I do all my modifying. You put all the data they in here, positions they play, where they came from, all the good stuff. But if we look at, take a look and see where I can see Zonka. Hold in the pass block. And I'm getting down a rabbit hole here of some other stuff I won't go into now. I want to dig around and look at here because um, football is something that I have not played head to head in so long or been in a league in so many years that I have really not even touched on half of the options that have come into this game over the last 10 plus years, which is really cool. This is a great view right here, the all, where you can look at all the players. You can start seeing durability rating, value. The other thing, since I'm creating players from scratch, I'll come over every once in a while under tools and I'll reset the player salaries because it's looking at their stats and how well they performed in ratings and all that to figure out what that would the equivalent for a, you know, a salary would be. So I'll select that and then just hit perform tools. And now it gives you a good idea if you're going to go look at a roster here. Let's take a look at Georgia. You can start seeing value, how this is the value they've put on it. So you can see Jim Brown, no doubt, right? Deshaun Watson and Cam Newton, you got to bet that the stats that a quarterback can put up, very high rated here. So they're definitely putting a lot more value on the skill positions than they would like Mel Blount, who's probably one of the best cornerbacks on this team. Calvin Johnson, the highest rated running back here, right? Or wide receiver. It's just a fun way to look at it. It's got another good view to see all the. You can see who leads the team in fumbles and different things. No history here. Showing like when you do the replay, you can see how the pace people were on. Special stuff. Yep, we've got a holder in Ray Guy. So just having a blast doing this. So hopefully I've got 3 more minutes and we can run over and watch Clue kick this off on his deal. It is kind of nice as we rotate from creator to creator, but this project I'm laughing because Slovic, I don't know, he's got some power of persuasion, talked me into something. I said, there is no interest I have in who cares what state somebody was born into. It had meant nothing to me. Now I'm taking time off from work to work on this thing. So that's how I've shifted over into this project. So it's been really fun. See if my spreadsheet, oh, look at this. Oh, here, I can show you my spreadsheet now. Let's get this up here. So now we want to take a look at some teams. So here's the team I'm just creating right now. Then we're going to get in, I'll get into Alabama next. This is Alabama's team. You can see Alabama, not as big as Texas or California, but look at the players on this team. Philip Rivers should show up well. Be interesting to see the ERA plus when Stabler and Bart Starr are in there, and it's doing the cross era comparison to see how they rate. Ozzie Newsome, tight end. You got T.O., Julio Jones, John Stallworth, Gene Washington. So some of these states, and how about this? Bo Jackson. Interesting team. Some of the other ones that stand out. Here's the New York team. We got Legends is in New York. We'll look at this one in New Jersey, and then I'll call it quits. And what I plan on doing, maybe every week or two, is as I get some new teams, is pop on and Arnold. I'm going to ask Chris if he's still around. I think here's the way I look at it. If you pull up a season, if I pull up a regular season, okay, let's say I'm going to do, I don't know, 1969, okay. The whole idea with 69 is it's going to replicate that season, right? So you're looking at all the stats and everything, and it's like, okay, I'm going to go back on something that happened. So all those stats matter so much. But if I'm concerned about like future oriented things, to me, alternate reality is where it's at. And I'm just really starting to think about this right now. So I don't know if I think it's in the rules where they really talk about alternate reality and what it is, but it is going to be them looking forward, right? Don't we have the manual in here? Let's pull this sucker up. Okay, alternate reality. Let's take a look at this. Adds variety and depth to the coaching, right? It ensures that season will not play out exactly the same way twice. The abilities are not based on the raw stats, but on hidden ratings. These ratings usually closely reflect the real life performance, right? So you're not going to take Staubach, or you're not going to take somebody that's some slug and just turn them into a great quarterback, right? But it's going to randomly vary for each player, meaning you don't know what you're going to get from him. Is he going to perform it? In this game that you're going to stick with Staubach if he has a bad game because he's your best choice. But in an all-star like this, you got to kind of look at how they're playing because you don't know if for this season you're getting the real star back, a bump up, or a slight bump down, right? So that may make you bring in Len Dawson. This is why I think it's so future focused in the alternate reality. I'd like to see us take this to our Howie Shanks League for the same reason, because we're not looking back trying to replicate exactly what their performance was in a replay season. We're like looking at a what if or future. And to me, alternate reality really does that. So it's like it's saying here from a coaching perspective, if your running back is struggling, you got to really look at that and figure out, well, maybe they're not going to be as good as they were in real life. Maybe somebody else is going to get that, right? And then it hides the outcome percentages. So if you look at the analysis tools and all that, they hide that because if you could reverse engineer it if you were all able to see, you could see the tweaking that the game was doing to those numbers. You could read into it. So I think it's just a really cool way to kind of blindly go in. And when you've got an all-star team like this, I think some random variation in their performance makes sense. So when I'm doing my state team right here, it's like, okay, let's get Pennsylvania's running backs. Yeah, who am I going to play? I don't know. All right. So maybe I start off and I've got Dorsett and, Eddie George and or whoever. And I'm like, man, they're not doing that good. Maybe I'm going to give somebody else a shot. I just think it's a really cool twist. I've never done it in a league or just playing out some of my projects. And I think I'm going to start digging into it. And for this one, it's going to be great. Going to be great. So I'm going to cut it off and get back to doing some work. And I say we hop on all over to Legends, and he's going to have a broadcast. Let's pop over to Legend Sports Universe, and he's got a cool thing going on with MLB The Show and his baseball project. My next thing is I've got to tell you that once I get this set up for Chris, is there a football game with better visual presentation out there that I could also take my data and build? Axis football. Madden. So that'll be my next thing. Once this project's done, can I then emulate this in other football sim games and transfer it over there? But I got to get this done before I start heading down those rabbit holes. So appreciate everybody tuning in here on a Monday afternoon for a little update. I'll pop in more and more with these, but I'll see you over at Legends Sports Universe.